so that we have this for others to look back on as we're making our decision. And with that, please feel free to take control and load your presentation.
All right. First off, how was travel day, and where are we?
So I think a lot of us are back now. We were at some of us were at the World Stroke Congress in Toronto, and I think it went really well. Thank you for asking.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Toronto's not far. I think maybe a 6 or 7 hour drive. Hopefully that was a nice conference. So you're back now. You weren't heading out. You're now back.
Yep, and most everyone is back now.
Got it. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I put together a few slides. So, Robin, thanks for inviting me. Really happy to advance to this next stage here. I think that there's a lot of potential, and I think clearly there's synergy between Sven and where you guys are headed, and then of course my background in history. I'm going to see if I can maybe tweak this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I apologize in advance for all of the questions, but in trying to prepare given our relatively short time frame, I wanted to be sure and ask as many. So I know we've got a lot of outstanding questions, but wanted to be sure to share some overarching ideas. It's clearly critical to identify the personnel allocation. Thank you, Ronnie, by the way, for sending over those financials in short order a week or so ago. That was helpful. It's always fun to kind of dig into 16 pages of organizational financials, and there's that lends itself to more questions. But again, Ronnie, thanks for that. But it really is important to identify that personnel allocation to see what that model will look like. Another thing that was of concern, I must share candidly from our first interview, was kind of this separate, mechanism to hire like an MT. Hey, Megan, kind of MT executive director. I think it's critically important for the board to understand nonprofit board structure, and that the selection committee and the board hires the executive director, and then the executive director hires staff. So that's just an important procedural item to keep in mind. We are clearly in need of a deeper dive into the financials, but I will kind of cover some of those outstanding questions that I have. But really, it's important to build a model and a system that endures, and I know that that's why we're focusing on this transition from an association management company to an employee model, and that's a big part of why we are all here. Okay, so I do have some the positions broken out as I saw fit, but I wanted to be sure and outline that there are several outstanding questions that, of course, we would need to answer and refine as we go along. Chief among them are which of the committees and subcommittees would need to be staffed, about how many financial transactions are there per quarter. I think I have an idea of generally what that figure might be, just given the fact that there are 600 members, and then a decent idea of about how many registrants you have for your annual meeting. But that will be important to refine. Of course, grants, as I spoke about last time, Sven is a really grant-heavy organization, and so understanding the durability of those, and if any of those have been secured for 2024 or where we're at in the process, is essential. Again, that 2024 budget allocation for personnel, that goes hand in hand with that expenditure. What is that trend from the last couple of years, for those two AMCs? Are there other contracted services? Like I've done my best to identify what I think has largely been attributed to the AMC, but kind of beyond that, what do those other contracted services look like? Of course, association management software, would be at the top of that list, among others. Was curious about CME sponsors and what that kind of has historically looked like. From what I could tell online, it appeared that Cinemed was the co-sponsor for your annual meeting next month. And then for me, wanting to have a better understanding of the evening and weekend commitments. Of course, we all should be champions of work-life integration. And so want to make sure that I've got an understanding there of what that looks like. And then also curious about where we're at in the 2024 member renewals. So those are kind of the outstanding questions that I'm most curious about. And yet, given those questions, just to make sure that we're spending our time well and to provide a little bit of insight into how I went about assigning some of these duties. So if you'll bear with me for a second, really what I did was took your descriptions, like all of the tasks, you broke them down kind of by subject area. And I gave them my own kind of color-coded breakdown. So, executive, my position would be in the black, bold, communications orange. Anyhow, that's really how I went about it. And there you will see, at the end, that there's maybe a handful of items that aren't assigned. Of course, it kind of depends on how the other positions are filled, but that was really the process that I kind of went through. It was to just give you an idea that this wasn't a position of just trying to slide these together randomly. There's of course a great deal of thought to this. So the positions as I saw them beyond the executive director would be a director of operations and education. Now, a note there would be that those may need to be separated into two different positions, a comms director, membership director, the MT 2020 director that I understand is kind of under a separate, currently under kind of a separate contract pursuit. And then I believe that we could contract with an accounting firm for financials. So that wouldn't be like a full-time employee. So I can list these. I kind of hate reading to you. I don't know if Robin, you would rather we kind of talk about that generally, or if you would prefer for me to go ahead and go down the list.
I think for many of us, it's a new concept and we're less familiar with the things that I think you know so well. I would ask that maybe you go over it in a little detail for us, because I think that is always good for us to hear your expectations and what ours should be as well.
Yeah. So one piece that I might even start off with, not to go backwards, but I added one and I put it in bold just simply because it is, an additional item from what was in the RFP. And of course, that's hiring personnel and signing contractors. That is far and away going to be, one of the most impactful things and most consequential things that I would be doing right off the bat. But of course, managing the overall operations of the association, effectively making sure that everything is done, that the train's running on time, committees are staffed that need to be staffed, that we're getting financials from our, accounting firm partner, assisting compiling and producing the annual business report. That is, certainly an item that I would be, familiar with doing. And thank you for that, Megan. And then executive committee meetings, an exec is always going to be on all high-level meetings, certainly board meetings and certainly executive committee meetings. So I see that those, are both scheduled for monthly in-person meetings after the annual meeting. That's, standard, of course, that's every exec anticipates an annual meeting being an all hands on deck situation, and you really want to take advantage of that shared time together in one space, physically. And of course, any ad hoc meetings that pop up, of course, over time, you can find that certain financial or certain strategic pillars are important to focus on. And so that's a pretty standard item. Assisting in the agenda preparation and distribution, I'd be working with the president to develop those agenda items. Of course, those are largely going to be formed through those executive committee meetings. I mean, the executive committee is really discussing items of critical importance to the profession. So there's not going to be anything particularly surprising, I wouldn't think, but the exec would be working hand in hand with the president to finalize those agendas. And then, of course, any meeting presentation items, that would be something that the executive would develop. Budget preparation, I feel like I've got at least a foot in that water at this point. That's critical. I mean, membership and finances, I mean, they go hand in hand. So, that's an expected item for the association exec. Investments, I would certainly be serving as that liaison between our broker and the board. And then, of course, I mean, all things budget, but I included it simply because it was in the RFP. Again. Annual meeting site selection. Some of these, such as like hotel arrangements, contract negotiations is something I would be doing. Hotel arrangements, some of that could be passed off to a director of operations. Of course, the on-site selection process, I don't know if there is, a build out, like if we've got, 20, 24, 25, 26 already finalized, if we have cities that have been identified, I would imagine that that's, work that would begin at the committee level and works its way up to the board. But in terms of executing what is decided, that's something that I would do. And of course, developing a budget for that annual meeting, securing industry and grant funding, that is, of course, an ongoing item that we need some additional insight on. And then board member orientation, a lot of that goes hand in hand with the board election process. But once you do have your board members, it would be appropriate for the executive director to provide that board member orientation. And then the next position would be a director of operations. And the way I saw it, it made a lot of sense to go ahead and combine that with education duties. So virtual assistants, and again, carrying forward some of these items from the RFP that have been outlined. Some of that virtual assistance and overseeing the virtual platform, such as Zoom or Teams, coordination of meeting notification, adding new events with payment options, providing reporting capability on registrations, credit card processing. So a certain element of that event execution, of course, would be under the educational component and, of course, the operational component as well. Maintaining the contracts and making sure that those are stored in a secured cloud. Full event planning and registration, e-commerce services, on-site registration. I will say that, again, any event is going to be an all hands on deck situation. So all of these, individuals, while there may be certain duties on certain days that would be assigned, that's the beauty of association work, is that, on your most important days, you're, filling in wherever you need to help. So if, the director of operations and education were a little overloaded, it would be perfectly appropriate for the membership director to step in and help, process folks with registration at a rush time. And it's really important that, especially with a relatively small team like this, I'm a big believer in making sure that you are not operating in silos. If the kind of example that I have used over time is, if there's only one person that knows how to do a certain thing for the association, that's really a liability. If somebody gets, hit by a bus tomorrow, then what happens? You can't have an association fall apart because there's operational silos. So you certainly want a certain degree of task overlap so that, folks can step in if there's, an illness or, like I say, like an annual event. The Director of Operations and Education would also assist volunteer leaders and ID speakers. Of course, they would be working with the Education Committee and Program Committee to develop, outline some of that content. Speaker management and coordination, working with that committee, coordinating those calls and responses. Of course, anybody that's done conferences, especially CME, of course, physician conferences, there is a great degree of paperwork and detail in the program accreditation process. And then those jobs continued kind of the research, an element of the research piece. So the poster presentation coordination, making sure that there's space dedicated for that part of the educational program. Some of those contract needs that are arranged with the hotel, like podium setup, AV needs, electronic and physical means. So all of those items that are essential to delivering a quality educational program. I also slid in providing the awards committee support. So that's, pretty typical for pretty much any association. We always want to celebrate the colleagues that are, well respected and worthy of recognition. And that would clearly make sense for the Director of Ops. And then provide administrative support from time to time that may not necessarily be listed in this RFP, but it made sense to kind of place that piece there. So moving on to the communications director duties, web and other media support. And then pretty much, I don't know that I'll read every single piece of this, but anything, related to the website and social media and messages, whether it's print, online, social media, and, text, if we expand. So, all of those duties, making sure that anything that is seen by membership or by the public is up to date. And then the communications director duties continued. Really staying up to date on kind of changes to the industry. Of course, I mean, social media for one has become an increasing method of communication. Some of these platforms, didn't even exist 10 years ago. So staying up to date on that will be essential. You'll see there's a continuation of some of the individual items like on the website that need to be updated. That person would also be providing any recommendations on new formats or tools. So if there's an expansion, like I say, into text messages, it would be appropriate for the comms director to weigh in there. Latest technology and social media platforms to maximize audience engagement. That can be stuff like, I'm sure, maybe even in Toronto, you had a presentation where a presenter was wanting to make it more interactive and they, have a poll, and maybe you have, clickers out in the audience, or maybe you text a certain number to kind of help make a presentation more dynamic. So those types of opportunities and enhancements could come from the comms director. Solicit articles using identifying authors, using blog tools. Of course, there's picture editing, formatting. They would be updating the calendar of events, photos, and then all things program promotion. So, making sure that, once the details for an annual meeting have been finalized, that's presented on the website, and managing calls for nominations and candidate materials would be their duty as well. And then membership duty, and I will say currently it's a little bit lighter. The membership duties, this director is a good candidate for maybe some of these currently, in this iteration anyhow, this currently unassigned duties that I'll share here in a moment. But the membership director essentially deals with all things membership. How do you retain members? How do you engage new members? Any whether it's online, print, items, those would be something under the purview of the membership director. Maintaining the database, that's a 24/7 item. A membership database is never perfect. People always move, and there's different industry stats out there about how often some of these pieces of information change. But if you think about it, there's cell phone changes, employer changes, moves. And so that's, a membership director's responsibilities and and duties are never done. And then making sure that they're using the association management software to export those membership, that member data into a directory that is mirrored onto the website is something that's under the membership director purview. Engaging those members, of course, depending on kind of where we are in the membership cycle, at a certain point, you're really going to kind of close off that fiscal year's recruitment, and then make sure that you're carrying forward and engaging with only current year members before you begin your renewal. So kind of all things database management is going to be a membership director's responsibility. I also place setting up and issuing online meeting invites in support of these membership groups under this director. And then any other activities designed to increase and retain membership. In my initial interview, I had outlined some examples of like challenges and kind of exciting recruitment opportunities that are out there to make not only the organization grow, but have some fun doing that. So that would be kind of a perfect example if there was a membership challenge where a SVIN member that recruited the most new members received, say, a prize, like a free registration or cash. I think everybody responds to cash. And then the last item there is providing administrative support, monitoring the listserv. And then the MT director, I just copied over essentially those duties as posted on that separate listing on the SVIN website. And currently, I think that based on what I know, I know that we still need to get some of those, numbers in terms of like the number of monthly transactions. But I believe that the finance piece can be contracted out, so not necessarily requiring a full-time employee. And those duties for that, firm that we would contract with are listed here. So those monthly reports, any engagement with the treasurer by date certain would be their duty. Of course, income and expenses, that's all going to be something they're going to be, providing all of those, general ledger support items. So those monthly statements that go to the board would be in their purview. Tax prep, of course, they would already have the all of the necessary coding, would provide the corporate registration and arrange for the external auditing services. And since it was on there as an item, I imagine that that's a decision that the board kind of has as existing policy to do a full-fledged audit as opposed to just a financial review every fall. But I think I think that as a matter of policy is great. I think that provides some strong financial integrity to the organization, and especially, a membership organization when you're, cycling through, each year. I think it's a great policy, and that accounting firm would be providing those necessary details for that independent audit. And then some of these you'll see these are both joint and unassigned duties. Part of this will depend on the timing and hiring of individual people and what skill sets they bring to the table. And if there's maybe a communications director that has perhaps more event experience, then we could perhaps transition over some of these items. Like one big one that's currently unassigned is organizing the gala. So of course, some of these can be shifted depending on the individual personnel. It's like in theory, we can identify these positions as individual job descriptions, but at the end of the day, they're going to be filled by actual people with unique skill sets. So we can, borrow, depending on their kind of background, from perhaps other duties. So yeah, there were, like I say, a couple that I had kind of recognized are going to be not necessarily, totally assigned to one individual staffer. It would really be a joint effort. Chief among them would be developing and publishing the membership marketing materials. I mean, that's kind of a membership meets comm activity. And then updating the database to market prospects. I mean, that's, your membership director is working hand in hand, creating updated non-member lists and, sending that to your comms director to really kind of shape a message to engage those non-members to hopefully recruit them. And then managing the phones, this was listed again in the RFP 8 to 5. I think, given modern technology and like what Zoom can do, it's very easy to, incorporate software where it directs a caller of a certain need with the corresponding staffer. So I think everybody, would be essentially on call, in a remote work world during those listed hours. And then this is my last slide. This is kind of a continuation of the successful transition slide that I had discussed at the end of the first interview. What this would look like is coordinating those dates and details with the selection committee. By virtue of my current employment agreement, I would require a 60-day notice. And then from there, and given a really tight time frame, this is, of course, something that would need to take place essentially immediately. But approving that 2024 budget, we can't operate. One of my favorite life mantras is we've got to eliminate variable when we can to make good decisions, right? So let's do it. Approve a 2024 budget, and of course, identifying that personnel expenditure item. As for me, and this would be upon approval of my current employer. I wouldn't want to do any of this without a transition plan in place for them. I want to make sure that they would be provided a smooth exit. So what I would be proposing is a consultation of 2 months, in November and December, during evenings and weekends. That would be about 20 to 30 hours a month before transitioning full time at approximately the beginning of the year. Those priorities for that consultation time, of course, would be meeting with the board, meetings in coordination with the outgoing association management company, Smith Buckland, financial deep dive. I mean, some of those questions, I believe most members of the committee received that separate document of the more granular level finance questions. It's really just making sure that we understand what's being provided by Smith Buckland or an outside vendor, because of course, if it's currently being provided by Smith Buckland, we want to make sure that those tasks are encompassed in the new employee model. And then, of course, a priority of that consulting time would be finalizing those job descriptions, postings, interviews, hirings. We would all need to work within. I would need to work within that personnel expenditure to make sure that we are hiring the right staff at the right personnel cost. And the hope, the intention would be to prioritize director of operations and education and have a financials, like an accounting firm contracted, effective to begin January 1st. And then a month later, the communications director, membership director, and the MT director. Those are really ambitious targets, but I think it's important to get those on paper and itemize them. So with that, that kind of concludes my kind of officially presented presentation.
Excellent, Matt. Thank you so much for delineating those duties. I think you did a very good job of understanding kind of the scope of the society and how to meet the needs. You definitely outlined a good plan for a standalone company or a standalone, I think, service for SPIN. My question to you, I guess, is during this transition, it's going to take time, as you pointed out in your timeline, to execute all of these directors that would be meeting the needs for the society. How would you envision the society is going to be able to keep going, especially for the meeting planning that needs to take place in preparation for 2024, the committee meetings, the subcommittees? Is there a place or a need for a transition period that might look more of a hybrid model until we could have all of the appropriate FTEs in place for a standalone?
You know, we sure could. What does the kind of tail of the Smith-Buckland contract look like? Is there, I imagine there are allowances and terms for extending that contract by a month or?
At the moment, it does not look like they are going to be able to extend the contract beyond the time deadline, which is December 31st. So we will have to look at transitions, whether it be with an AMC or, however we might envision it.
Okay. Yeah, and just to answer Megan's question there in chat as well, regarding like the directors, this association is going to need individuals that are experienced in kind of their field of expertise. And so if each of these positions outlined were really directors, and that will be able to assume a certain that would require a certain experience level and also be able to command a certain compensation. One example I would give is if there were, say if we were a 6,000 member organization and there were more needs on updating a membership database. In theory, you could have, or it would be likely that you would have like a director of membership, and then below them, like an education coordinator that would be paid less, have, less, fewer essential duties. But given this transition, I think it's critical to require a certain level of expertise for each of these kind of domains, each of those critical pillars for SPIN.
Matt, I had a question. Robin, go ahead. I can ask or.
Well, why don't you ask your question while I ask Matt? Could you also put up that slide again for the unassigned duties? I just want to I have a question specific for that. And go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, so my concern on behalf of the group is just related to the director level people, because obviously, in a small staff, that is why it is difficult until you grow to have people at varying levels. And that's why a lot of times people work with an AMC, because you can get pieces of people. My concern is, do you feel that the budget, who's going to do the lower level work? And then if you're hiring all directors, are they going to do lower level work? Because that will still need to be done. And then the question to you is the budget going to support people at that level? And so, I think that would be the ideal way, plan in the next 3 to 5 years or whatever. I just don't know if having, I guess you are an expert, Matt. I appreciate it. So I don't know if you thought about, I have a question in here somewhere. what alternative would be, and if the budget is going to be able to even support that level. Because thinking of if you're saying $1 million budget, that means 50% maximum should be spent on personnel and headquarters infrastructure. So given your salary, that's only leaving 300,000 to 400,000. Are you going to hire all these directors and have the right team for that amount of money? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I've been, so straightforward on trying to nail down that personnel piece. I think I know roughly what that AMC contribution has been. I mean, there's, quite a few, questions that I had, for the committee, just in terms of being able to itemize what was previously dedicated to the, AMCs each of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, it looks like it's closer to 800,000 or maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're correct, but I guess the question is, I think the nailing down the 2024 budget isn't going to be able to. I mean, one of the reasons looking at this model is because that wasn't sustainable, I think a little bit. And so again, it really depends on the revenue. It's like we can grow a spin, you can hire more people, obviously, but wanting to have a model that the organization isn't operating at a deficit. So I guess my question, until you were, is there a better, good, better, best kind of thing? Like, is there a way to operate more leanly until you had a good handle on the revenue coming in, the sponsorship? We could get the levels up, because eventually, yes, I mean, you have to have a team that supports the work. But I think right now, again, Tom, jump in, is that the AMC's fees weren't necessarily matching the revenue fluctuations in some ways. So I guess the question is, how do we handle that? And make an operation that is sustainable, that can grow as the organization grows over time. And so that my question is, like, what positions are your immediate must? Because I don't know if you're going to be able to hire 5 directors sustainable when you nail down that 2024 budget. I'm not sure. That's one thing they were having you dig into. Sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time. But I just want to make sure we have it answered. And okay.
Yeah, no. So 2 thoughts. First, the director of ops would be essential. Well, 3 thoughts. The director of ops really is I'm mindfully connecting that to education.
Yep.
Because SFIN is really interesting financially in many ways, but especially because the proportion of dues is quite small. And that can cut both ways. That can be both beneficial and detrimental, but there's no reason to look at this as anything other than a positive. Point being, the lion's share of revenue is coming from the annual meeting. And so, having somebody that can really lead that effort, in addition to myself, of course, that's why that, director of operations / education is an essential hire, because it really keeps the most, I hate to say this, but I'll say it, the most essential plates spinning, right? They will be able to bring their own skill set, which may overlap. So there's that. Point 2 would be that membership, as you can tell, as currently identified, the membership piece is the most sparse. So would be the best candidate to hire like an educational coordinator, because again, an only 600 member organization, I shouldn't say only, manageable 600 members, and then, corresponding other prospects, that the membership director is a great candidate to kind of de-escalate into a coordinator position.
That I was thinking the same thing, like a membership / education coordinator role. And then, so yes, that's what I had in my head. So you, the same thing.
Okay. But yeah, I think, back to, and I agree 100% with everything you just said. I will say that, building a model and system that endures, like that is something that we can't let go by the wayside. It's like, I've seen it before where, it's always a dream and it's never reality. And so I like kind of stating that this is the goal, but recognizing that we have to work up to that and build a,
Perfect.
model that endures.
Thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to make sure that was the dream team versus the team on day one.
Yeah, but it is essential that we kind of nail down that number, but absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. You had a lot of, I think, points that I wanted to kind of draw out as well. And to echo that, and I think, looking at these responsibilities of unassigned duties, they're not trivial. And I'll give you an example. You look at the 18 subcommittees that we have, that has to be supported by someone. And I don't know that it can just be distributed amongst those individuals that you've delineated for their duties. It is going to take an infrastructure to kind of support some of these things that you have listed here that maybe goes beyond those that you've already outlined. So in kind of echoing that, okay, the standalone and that model you outlined is our goal. How might we get there in the interim while we are trying to stabilize from these transitions and during the transitions and get on kind of a better footing before we can kind of launch into our standalone model? Would you be open to a hybrid model or do you see the benefit in that in trying to get us to a point where eventually we could be at a standalone?
Megan, could you walk me through what that would look like for Sven or Robin, if that's?
Yeah, for example, and certainly Megan can elaborate more on this. For example, we have kind of met with a couple AMCs that would have interest in working as a hybrid model where, let's say, we are not independently hiring some of these individuals that you've outlined for right now, but they would have from day one that ability to come in and support and help in the transition while you're not able to be there fully, so that there would be no lapse in some of our important initiatives like planning for our meeting next year. And Megan, you can elaborate further on that as well.
Yeah, I like to think of it, so related to the hybrid model, just to echo what Robin said, it's really would be working with an AMC, again, to do all the staff duties per se, as you would bring people on board, and give these director positions. So does that help, Matt? I mean, I think they've narrowed it down to one particular AMC that would be something they could work with. And then almost that operations person you're discussing would be an employee of the AMC and all the staff.
Yeah, I would be open to that. I mean, I think it would be, important that we, arrive at a semi-finalized-ish list of duties, and making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of, what those handoffs look like. And then, it's not exactly a model that I had envisioned, but I think that there's opportunity there. And I would be, open to that, making, if that's what we believe would serve the organization the best to make sure that, no plate is dropped, then I think we work within that confine.
And I think it would be, go ahead. Yeah.
As you did in the past, amazing presentation. I think for me, this is a very, very important aspect.
Santi, you're breaking up on us. I'm so sorry. We can't hear you.
Time is we need to in this transition. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Barely.
Oh, then can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm driving in the middle of Iowa and the signal is not great. But let me see if I can just ask the question quickly while you still hear me. The question is, what do you think? We want to hear your opinion about what is the best. Our goal would be to not drop our important initiatives while we still don't lose a lot of money. And that's why I think the model has to be thought very carefully, and your opinion is very important. We need to decrease we don't want to get, we want to do it financially savvy. Decrease maybe the non-urgent or non-essential activities while we keep the main initiatives going and decrease the potential loss that we're going to assume some during the transition, but minimize it. And your input based on the model that you think is best would be critical.
Yeah, I think that getting to a standalone employee model as quickly as possible is essential. I think, what we're all recognizing is that if that requires a go-between hybrid for, say, a select number of months, that's essential. But I think the most important thing we can do is really dig into the financials, because I think it's critically important that we are looking for opportunities to save. And I mean, I think that's why in that kind of analysis, there were, no less than a couple dozen items that I think we need, clarified. It's kind of like the, opposite of kind of like, organizational, like task overlap. You don't want these silos, and you want, staff to be able to understand, cross-departmentally, so that the organization thrives. It's kind of the opposite on the financial side, right? Like you don't want, this one, vendor that's serving, membership purposes, while a separate vendor is essentially doing the same thing for an event, right? So really drilling down on some of those outstanding questions on the finances is, I mean, I just can't overstate it enough. I mean, that's critical, because that's an understanding of resources, right? I mean, we need as much clarity there as possible. And that will help inform that, transition timeline, right? Because we're not going to want to enter into, fiscal year 2024, knowing that we're, $300,000 behind. So, I think, the more we can do to focus, time on refining some of those questions on finances, I think the better we'll all be served.
So Matt, and I don't want to occupy more time, but I do have a quick question. So if, looking at your model, if we understand that we're going to also have to meet a need additional from their director to, as outlined, we were looking for 0.8 to 1 FTE to help support MT 2020 with some of their administrative work. And we need to have an additional support for some of the committees, subcommittees, and some of those unassigned duties. In your model, what would you predict or estimate, and no, we wouldn't hold you to it, but what would we be looking at for an operational budget? Roughly, a range.
As currently defined?
With the additional support that I think we needed to maybe add for MT 2020 and for some of those unassigned duties.
Yeah, what is the range? What are we looking at for MT 2020?
So Santi, what would be the salary for the MT 2020? And no, Matt, we do appreciate your view on the MT 2020 director. There has been a contract, or is it executed already? They had picked someone, but I think they would be very open to any further, decisions that had to be made, including or utilizing, as you had outlined, as your role for the executive director. But Santi, what was the salary that was offered to that person?
The salary is still in negotiation. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, I think it's still pending. We have not finalized it.
We haven't finalized it. It's in between 120 range. We are still negotiating that. And then the support that we are currently having, which we might need to decide if this is sustainable in the transition, is getting part-time clerk for helping to organize, mobilize, arrange for meetings, getting the minutes, which is Ivonne, and she's dedicating about at this moment 0.5 FT for that. That's why I think considering that expense plus the essentials that Matt considers during the transition, with the idea obviously and the timeline, I think eventually Matt will be important. The dream team is very clear, and I think it's really well thought out and really well put in place. Then probably when we're gonna get to the dream team will be depending on our performance, your performance, our performance, and getting there. But I'm convinced that based on the detail and based on the with the strategic plan that we can put together, we can get there for sure. But at this current time, during the transition time, considering the expenses from mission thrombectomy that we mentioned, plus what you think is essential, I think it would be nice to know the range of expenses and then the timeline. I think I think in your previous interview, you told us that it would make sense probably to consider at least 3 to 6 months, right, of transition until you get the hires, you get the essential people there, you get a feeling of things that probably you will not pick up until we start. But I think that's, and then as you said, that would also be, it would be critical. I mean, Dr. Fawaz Al-Mufti is taking over from me for the treasurer, but I will definitely help you if we decide to move forward during the month of November to really get a more with a Smith Buckling, a more critical view of the items on the budget. And really, as you said, I think it's critical that we get the 2024 based on the model that we decide, based on your vision, based on the essentials, and knowing the expenses for MT 2020, what is going to be the budget for operational budget for that year to really get into it, because it's going to be a year of transition, and we have to assume some losses. But as you said, it's going to be also opportunities to decrease non-essential activities to minimize losses.
Thank you, Santi. I'm just going to add to that. Hi, Matt. Thanks for an excellent presentation. You've looked at our financial statements. You've seen the high cost that has been attributed to management. And that's in part why we are transitioning to the ED position, because we believe that that can be cost saving, because AMCs, we haven't had a very good streak with them. I've also had the chance, and several of the board members had a chance to look at 990 statements from other societies, the society foremost of which is the Society of Neurointerventional Surgery, which has been SNIS, I'll send it to you. It has been a good model in terms of fiscal conservatism of management compared to all the initiatives that they partake. And the revenue stream has been really enlightening in terms of helping us understand where we can potentially look for revenue and maximize savings. So when I've looked at those statements and other organizations such as the European Stroke, which is a way bigger organization than SVIN, we're seeing that the cost of management in general is no more than $500,000. So my question to you is, considering this ambitious plan that you've laid out, trying to meet our needs, because you've read all about it and you've seen our past statements, do you think you could try to make the total management company cost to, or your group cost to $500,000? And obviously we would work with you to try to optimize that, to make sure that your bandwidth is maintained, that you're not burned out, and that we would adjust the needs of our initiatives accordingly. And some initiatives may not be as active as others, or would have to find a way to self-sustain. And this is separate from the MT 2020 director position, which we expect would self-fund themselves.
Oh, so the 500,000, not counting MT 2020 director.
Correct, because the expectation is the MT 2020 would fundraise for their position. And then we would absorb the administrative help for that 0.5 FTE that Santi was outlining. And of course, in terms of the administrative structure that you proposed, i.e. the MT 2020 director being under you, I personally am totally in favor of that. I think that's what it should be. And that's something we still have to negotiate with MT 2020 team to make sure that they are in agreement. But I completely agree that we need oversight so that the expenses do not go out of hand, because in transparency, we are going into a $350,000 deficit this year, in part because of lack of oversight on the finances of MT 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, that would have to be fixed. To your question, outside of that MT 2020 director position, do I think it's possible to get to a $500,000 or below? I can get close, yes. But I mean, that would be, presuming that finance is contracted, and then we find some other, maybe even like a part-time membership coordinator.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the thought is, director positions are very prestigious, but a lot of the work is clerical and administrative, like Megan outlined. And so you may not need a high-level position or a high-level experienced person. You could hire someone out of college that can, administer the website, which will take some training. Some IT savvy, college grad could probably handle that, and offload the workload from you to handle the website issues and membership. So that is very clerical. Taking minutes is clerical. And so perhaps if we could downscale some of the high-level positions that you've envisioned, maybe we may not need to, attribute such a high cost to these leadership positions within SBIN.
But yeah, again, just to complement, Matt, what Sam said, that the financial prudence, if you wish, or the be cautious with the finances in the transition year is critical. But I think we will defer to your expertise. We will give you advice, as Tang advice is very, very important. But you are going to be the leader to kind of help us out to drive this. And as I talked in the first day, right? It's not like you are managing us. At the end of the day, obviously, we all need from a salary. But this is your society, and we trust your expertise. We'll obviously work together as the board members, but we will not tell you, do this or do this. We trust your expertise. Once you understand better and feel comfortable knowing the detail of the budget, we can, decide together what you think is essential and not essential. But I think that level of 500,000 during the transition year, I think it's a very good number to keep in mind, and then build on it depending on the success.
Thank you for that, Santi. That's helpful.
I want to be mindful of the time, just because I know that you had time limitations, Matt, for today, and I'm so thankful that you extended that time to help talk with us further. Do you have questions for us? And then I'll open to any final questions, but we want to be respectful for your time.
Yeah, I think just a general ballpark on, that kind of one personal item there regarding the, amount of time, number of days on evenings and weekends. Every association has a different cadence. And so I just kind of want to, be, clear about what that looks like.
So I would say, and of course the leadership here can add to it. In general, just because we are a physician society, many times meetings during working hours are difficult, or in mornings are difficult for many of us to make. We are proceduralists. I think board meetings tend to be in the evening. XCOM meetings tend to be in the evening. Of course, we wouldn't expect for you to work more than what you were, supposed to. It could accommodate, an a schedule that may be made up for times that went into the evening as opposed to the morning. For others on here, any other thoughts on that?
I think, hi, it's Boaz Mufti. I think, I mean, you're asking a great question. I would say ultimately, you're definitely going to be that position will definitely be below a full time, like within the 40-hour work week. It's not going to be beyond that. At least I don't think. Maybe initially it's going to be very close to that, but there are a lot of during the hours when we're all working, you will be doing a lot of other things, but there is going to be a lot of free times to make up for the rare probably no more than like 5 to 6 hours outside of the five or beyond 5 or 6 o'clock. It's usually not very long.
Got it. Yeah. And I walk into this eyes wide open. Of course, I've worked on behalf of physician associations for a decade, but I think, having that conversation from the outset is always, and being really transparent is helpful for both of us.
And I think it maybe is a healthy reflection for our members too, to take that into consideration a little bit more too, for their own work-life balance.
What is home from you, Matt? What is are you in Washington?
No, I'm in Columbus, Ohio. So
Ohio.
I'm Eastern time zone.
Yeah. Then that's we have to keep in mind that some of our West Coast colleagues, might finish job 4 or 5, and that would be when we have the board meetings XCOM. Sometimes we tend to look for Central Time, Eastern Time, 5-6 p.m. The meetings that we have, we meet, with all leadership, and then obviously, you'll be in charge, right, of the team schedule, but maximizing the time during the day for you to accomplish all the tasks that are required to kind of drive the society. It's your goal and your role, and then just support for us. We rarely, I don't think we have ever met on the weekends this year. It has to be like a catastrophe that happens or something like that. And then the weekend, the extra hours during the, after 5 p.m. Eastern time will only be the days that we will have the EXCO meeting or the board of director meeting. And then during as the main event, the annual meeting takes place, and Fawaz can maybe talk more about this year. Maybe you will need to meet a little bit with the annual meeting. You have your team to help and provide. It's not just you, but you may know what's going on. Those will require additional meetings as the annual meeting approaches, which will start to be more intense in April, May, etc. The rest of the stuff is usually regular hours, unless there is an emergency or something to vote upon. And multiple times we vote by email. And I don't think, but obviously we want to hear what you think is also acceptable for you to kind of work it out together.
Great. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Yeah. And then Robin, just, those those more granular budget questions that are outstanding. I think it's essential that we nail those down. And then, I want the opposite to also be true. If you have any other, remaining questions for me, I'm happy to answer those, on the phone or email or whatever is the most convenient.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, to be respectful for your time, if there's any outstanding questions that the members here today feel like they need to ask, otherwise we could submit them by email for Matt. All right, Matt, thank you so much for your time and meeting us on a Saturday, and we're excited to continue to explore this opportunity with you. And thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Robin. Really appreciate the full committee's time and attention, and have a great weekend. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Matt. You have a great time too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. All right, so